Hello, and welcome to Mr. Quickest Teaches. In today's lesson, I'll be providing a detailed analysis of the poem Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. My analysis will be presented with rolling annotations of the stanzas, lines, and important words and phrases in the poem. I'll emphasize the themes, literary devices, both figurative and poetic, tone, structure, language, etc. of the poem. To purchase the course that provides stanza by stanza, line by line, and word for word written and video analysis of all the 15 poems in the IGCSE anthology, visit mrquickestteaches.com. In the description box, you will find a link to a preview of the written and video analysis of Little Boy Crying by Mervyn Morris. The written course has been particularly helpful for students sitting the IGCSE because it gives clear guidance on the approved writing styles. Without further ado, join me. Let's demystify Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. Let's begin by speaking about the poet. Maya Angelou was born on April 4th, 1928, and she died on May 28th, 2014. She was an African-American poet and civil rights activist. Caged Bird was published in a 1983 poetry collection, Shaker, Why Don't You Sing? The poem contrasts the experiences of two birds, one free, the other caged or imprisoned. Now let me just give a brief background about the poem before we dive in. In the poem, Angelou strikingly conveys the contrasting experiences, polar opposite experiences of two birds. One is free to do as it pleases and is able to achieve all of its desires. The other is caged and tied, and so it's unable to do almost anything. But the caged bird has defiance, and we see that in its attitude and decision to sing. This is really important. Now, as you go through the poem, the structure of the poem is also important. That's a detail that I find that most analysts or people who analyze the poem seem to skip. So pay attention, and then you see how strikingly and powerfully Maya Angelou presents the contrary experiences of two birds. Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun's rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on a distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his home. But the caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped, and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on a distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So one of the first things we see about the poem is that the poem is in 6 stanzas, but the very first idea that jumps at us is literally a free bird leaping. So we are told that a free bird is a metaphor for those who are favored by the system, by society. For example, white people in America. It also stands as a metaphor for men. And the rich, those who have everything that they need and can do as they please. And we see that the very first action of the free bird is to leap. Leaps provides visual imagery of the bird jetting into the sky. It also indicates that the bird needs to apply very basic effort to achieve its goal, because the free bird is actually personified. We also see personification as well in the second line, and that is the word on the back of the wind. The word on the back of the wind provides visual imagery of the free bird being carried by the wind. So the wind here is personified to show that it is alive and well, and it's part of the infrastructure that has been set in place to aid the free bird as it goes around, trying to achieve what it set out for itself. And it continues in the third line that and floats downstream. Floats downstream indicates that even gravity helps to maximize the simple efforts of the free bird and make sure that it achieves grand things. And if we continue, the poem continues in the fourth line, says, till the current ends. We see also the use of enjambment, which I'm going to speak about later on, but till the current ends. It shows here that support is provided for the free bird until he achieves his goal to the maximum or in entirety. So there's no stone that is left unturned to make sure that the free bird is able to achieve what he wants to achieve. And we're told here that he dips his wing. He receives so much support that he can use his wing as a vestigial organ. You see, the wings are supposed to be what directs how he behaves, how he flies. But we see here that he's so lackadaisical and free to do as he pleases that something that is as important as his wing, one of his wings, is used to, he dips it into the sun. So it's like a vestigial feature, just like the appendix is, a vestigial feature in humans. People think that, or scientists believe that it's no longer needed in humans. It's the same kind of idea that Angelou presents here by telling the reader that the free bird dips his wing in the orange sun's rays. And the word orange sun's rays suggests that the bird receives, that's the free bird, receives fresh vitality from the very source of life. The sun is a source of life. It is the sun that allows grasses to grow, and then herbivores consume the grasses and the whole food chain. So we see here that it gets its power, its source of strength directly from the main source, which is the sun, and dares to claim the sky. We see also one of the key things that Angelou uses in the poem here. She uses anaphora, and that is seen in the repetition of the word and, that is and, in the third, fifth, and seventh line as the first word. This highlights the active and progressive nature of the free bird's action. So, and floats downstream, and dips his wing, and there's progression. It's almost as if it's going up and up and up stairs, and is able to achieve more and more things. So there's no impediment, as it were, on the way of the free bird. And in the final sort of line of the poem, we see here, dares to claim the sky. The use of the word dares there suggests that Angelou is shocked. Now, when we speak about the tone of the poet, she's shocked at the action of the free bird. The fact that he wants to claim something that is used, by all the birds as its own. It shows you the audacity of the free bird. It shows you its sort of, confidence and belief that it has the right to own something that is shared by everybody as its own, to claim it as its own. The use of the word sky there is a metaphor for the caged bird's audacious aspirations. So these words that Angelou uses actually has much more deeper meaning. So when she says he claims to and dares to claim the sky, it's sort of like a metaphor for the caged bird, being audacious, and his aspirations or dreams or the things he wants for himself being, mind-blowing. In the first stanza of the poem, we also see that various elements of nature are used. So powerful elements of nature, we see wind, stream, current, and sun. All of these are metaphors for the institutions, the laws, the persons that ensure that the free bird achieves his inspiration. So they also have like deeper meanings. We also see the use of enjambment as well in the first stanza, and this is seen in the flow of words from one line to the next. The flow of words from one line to the next mimics or mirrors the fluidity of the free bird's life and the constancy of his freedom. So the way the words flow until it gets to the final full stop in the seventh line indicates to the reader that there is nothing in terms of impediment on the way of the free bird. In terms of the structure of the first stanza is made up of 7 lines. 7 signifies perfection. And I think that Angelou uses 7 lines because she wants to reveal to the reader that the free bird's life is a perfect manifestation of freedom. So there is nothing whatsoever on its way to, impede him. And this is really important when you're speaking about the structure. In the second stanza, she introduces the life of a second bird. She says, but a bird that stalks down its narrow cage. The use of the word but there introduces a contrast or juxtaposition of the lives of the birds. So there's another bird. And the very first thing she tells us about the caged bird is that it stalks. So the use of the word stalks reveals to the reader that the cage bird's life is stiffened, has become stiffened. His body has become stiffened because he's in prison. He's no longer behaving naturally. And he stalks down his narrow cage. Now we see that he's going in the opposite direction of what the free bird was doing. The free bird leaped into the sky. He's stalking down his narrow cage. Down his narrow cage highlights that the cage bird is retrogressing and is imprisoned. So he's going against sort of the flow of nature. And she reveals to the reader that he can seldom see through. In the third line, can seldom see through highlights that he has an impaired vision of the future, especially his future. So he can seldom see through. And she continues that his bars of rage. Bars of rage is a metaphor for the cage that constantly surrounds the cage bird. It also highlights his penchant for overreacting, because he has like this response of always overreacting to issues. And he sort of has like extreme temper tantrums, and this has made it impossible for him to properly gauge how to react emotionally. So we see that the cage bird is not only affected in terms of his physical ability, but even his mental ability is affected. And she continues that his wings are clipped and his feet are tied. Clipped wings reveals that there is this deliberate attempt to prevent the cage bird from carrying on its natural talent, and so it cannot fly, which is the primary way that birds move about. And then we also see that his feet is also tied. Now the tying of the feet reveals that they want to also scuttle any secondary movement or talent of the bird, and this is really important. The fact that both his wings are clipped and his feet are tied reveals to the reader that there is a power, or sort of like a force, much more stronger than the cage bird that is acting against him. So there is a force and a deliberate attempt to make sure that they scuttle and impede his progress. We also see the repetition of the word his or his in the second stanza as well. His is mentioned 4 times in the stanza, but it is repeated as the first word of the 4th, 5th, and 6th line of the second stanza, to gender the bird and also to humanize him. So first of all, it genders the bird. What that means is that it makes the reader realize that the bird is like a male, right? And then secondly, it also humanizes the bird as well, to create the impression to the reader that, see, we are not talking about just a bird here, but we are talking about a human being. But she uses the metaphor, Angelou uses the metaphor of a bird to present this very vividly. But she wants the reader to realize that she's not talking about an it, but she's talking about something that has both feelings and is a human being just like the reader. She concludes the stanza by saying, so he opens his throat to sing. The use of the conjunction so suggests that the best action is his response to the situation. The 7th line also highlights his defiance. So is like he's defiant. It decides to act in defiance. It doesn't, become docile and allow itself to be controlled by the forces, the external forces that are more powerful than it is. Instead, he acts in defiance, almost as if he's daring the people who are bigger than him to continue to stand in his way. Now, when she uses the word, he opens his throat to sing, the cage bird we see here develops an alternative or newer skill as a coping mechanism. So he can't fly, he can't walk, so he decides to sing. He decides to make his situation and his presence known by singing. And the use of the word he opens his throat to sing reveals to the reader that the song of the bird was coming from the innermost recesses of his soul. So he opens his throat to sing. He opens his throat to reveal his presence. So he does it with deep emotions. It was very emotional. Again, like in the first stanza, we also see the use of enjambment as well in the second. And again, we see the flow of words from one line to the next. But in this instance, the use of enjambment here reveals visually to the reader that there was an unrelenting attempt to ensure that the cage bird continues to suffer and remains constantly imprisoned. So it was unrelenting. It was almost as if the powers that be are constantly looking at the cage bird to ensure that he remains in the situation that they've kept him. Additionally, just like the first stanza, the second stanza also has 7 lines. 7 again, like I mentioned, signifies perfection. The use of the 7-line stanza in the second stanza suggests that the cage bird's life is the worst manifestation of imprisonment. So we see that for the free bird, his life is like the perfect embodiment of life, of enjoyment, of freedom. Now, the 7 in the second stanza reveals to the reader that the life of the cage bird is the perfect manifestation of imprisonment and suffering. In the third stanza of the poem, Angelou reveals to the reader the song of the cage bird. She reveals that the cage bird sings. So we know already that he sings as an act of defiance, but she describes his song as with a fearful trill. With a fearful trill reveals that the cage bird's song, the nature of the song is like it's fearful. It's something that injects fear in the listeners, and I suspect that it injects fear in the ears of those who have imprisoned him. Long for still. We also see here that of things unknown but long for still. Of things unknown reveals to the reader that there are aspects of life that the cage bird is ignorant about because he remains caged. Long for still also reveals that these desires are strong. So they are the strong desires by this cage bird to, in spite of his situation, to know what is happening in the world, to find out what the world is about. And she continues that his tune is heard on a distant hill. His tune highlights that the song of the cage bird is melodious, so it's like a tune. It's something that people are going to enjoy listening to. His heard on a distant hill reveals to the reader that there is an audience for the song in far-flung areas way beyond the confines of the cage bird. So there are people who are interested in the song. There are people who look out for the song. There are people who want to hear the song. And she reveals in the last 2 lines of the third stanza that for the cage bird sings of freedom. For the cage bird sings of freedom reveals to the reader that there is this deep desire in the cage bird to reveal his situation to people. You see, and the use of the fact that his song is themed on freedom reveals to the reader that that is the most important thing for the bird. So that is his clarion call. That is his desire. That is like the thing that he longs for, is freedom. This is really striking as well because we see also in the second and the third stanza that Angelou uses end rhyme, and we see that in the words trill, still, and hill. The words trill, still, and hill are end rhymes that provide auditory imagery of the bird's melodious song. So the song of the bird was very melodious. Maya Angelou doesn't reveal to the reader the lyrics of the song, but she reveals to the reader the effect of the song. Because it's like a fearful trill. It's almost like, you can literally see the bird's mouth open and then his tongue, red tongue blaring out, singing loudly, and he wants people to know that he exists. So he's not going to just roll over and die, but he is very defiant and he wants everybody around to know his circumstance. In the fourth stanza, Angelou again shifts to the life of the free bird. She says that the free bird thinks of another breeze and the trade winds sough through the sign trees in the first 2 lines. Breeze and trade winds are metaphors for the different powerful forces that aid the free bird to achieve his aspirations. Breeze is when he needs like some soft push, but then trade winds is when he needs a powerful agent. So sometimes laws can be broken to aid him. Now, in terms of the trade winds and its connection with the birds, it's really important because it is trade winds that allow birds to fly from one continent to another. So they aid birds. So we see here that the free bird, has trade winds available to him to allow him to achieve grand goals. And just as the trade winds are very powerful and aid the migration of birds from one continent to another, the trade winds also try and push the free bird to achieve grand aspirations and dreams, and we are going to see that. We also see again a second use of personification in the poem, and we see that sough through the sign trees. Now, sign is personification because it personifies the trees, and here I think that Angelou uses the word sign trees to reveal to the reader that there are certain elements of nature that are unwilling participants in this, in what like she sees as some sort of like an unfair advantage for the free bird. So sign trees, there are aspects of nature or there are aspects of the law that do not agree to some of the actions or some of the experiences that the free bird has, but they still they can do nothing about it, and then they just continue to support him. We also see the use of alliteration and sibilance in the second line again. We see that in the repetition of the T and sibilant S sounds. Both of them combine to provide striking auditory imagery of the elements working together to ensure that the free bird achieves all its aims. So we see that in the repetition of the TT sound in the trade through the trees. And then we also see sibilance in windsoft sign trees. So the repetition of the T and the. So we see here that there is this grind, constant grind, on and on and on to ensure that the free bird achieves all of his aims. She continues that, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn. Fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn provides vivid visual imagery of well-fed, purposely bred worms that have been made available for the free bird in a well-kept environment. So it's not only that the quality of the food is very high, but also the place where he assesses the food is also well kept. And now this is really important because you see, one of the most known idioms is that the early bird eats the fattest worms. But we see here that there are fat worms that are waiting for the free bird. So it's almost as if there's this push by the powers that be that make sure that no matter when the free bird arrives, he still gets the best. So he does not have to go through the grind of the cage bird, but whenever he shows up, he still receives the best. And we see in the last line of the poem, the fourth stanza, and he names the sky his own. First of all, we see that the anaphora of the word "and" in the fourth stanza. Again, if you observe, we also saw the same idea as well in the first stanza. Again, the progression of the free bird's action. So it's repeated in the first as the first word of the second, third, and fourth lines of the fourth stanza to show the incremental nature of the freedom that the free bird enjoys and the unimpeded progress that he makes. So end. So just like in the first, we see that it's like a stairs. Building is going from one floor to the next. So there is this incremental nature to the freedom that the free bird experiences. In the last line, which is the fourth line of the fourth stanza, Angelou reveals, and he names the sky his own. He names the sky his own, shows us that the free bird's aspiration from the first stanza has been achieved. He dares to claim the sky, but in this fourth stanza, he's named it his own. So that means that if there's anybody or any other bird that wants to use that sky, they need as a necessity to get permission from him. In the fifth stanza, again, Maya Angelou introduces the life of the cage bird. She reveals, but a cage bird stands on the grave of dreams. The use of the but there shows that Angelou is contrasting or juxtaposing the lives and experiences of both birds using the word but. Stands on the grave of dreams, the cage bird is deliberately tortured by the constant memory of his deprived and unachievable dreams. So the forces that be make him, as it were, his dwelling place to be directly on the grave where his dreams are, the dead dreams. The dreams that were scuttled, and the dreams that they stood in his way to achieve. So he stands there. I think it is a way to mentally torture him, not only physically, like I mentioned, but also mentally mess with his mind to make sure that his mind is always on the edge. Again, we see the use of sibilance in the second line as well of the fifth stanza. Angelou reports his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. The repetition of the S sound in shadow shouts in a nightmare scream provides auditory imagery of the cage bird's nightmarish life. So here, what I see is that Angelo wants the reader to realize that the cage bird is tortured both in reality, as in when he's awake, and he's also tortured in his sleep. It also suggests that he's tormented in reality and his dream. So that's the point I was trying to make. For the cage bird, again, Angelo repeats the word HIS or his, just like she did in the second stanza, to again highlight to the reader that the humanity of the cage bird still remains. Additionally, she also highlights that society views the cage bird not by his actions, but by secondary reasons. So, like by him shouting. And we also see the use of repetition as well in this fifth stanza. Angelo repeats the fifth, sixth, and seventh lines of the second stanza as the last two lines of the fifth stanza to reinforce the image of the cage bird's imprisonment and the fact that nothing has changed for him. Instead, his life is getting worse and worse. Angelo repeats the third stanza a second time as the sixth stanza. That is the cage bird song. A repetition of the third stanza emphasizes the cage bird's defiance, the nature of his song, and his desire to announce his condition. So we see here that the cage bird constantly sings and is refusing to be quietened or refusing to be muted because he wants the world to find out, to know his situation. And I think that it is also a sort of like a clarion call by the cage bird to other birds. You know, I mentioned in the beginning that the cage bird is a metaphor for African Americans and how they are treated in America, especially during the Jim Crow years, and this constancy of racism. And I think here that Angelo wants the reader to know that black people, just like white people, are human beings, and black people can achieve just as granting just like white people, but the only problem is their experience. Just like the cage bird and the free bird are both birds, but it's only their circumstance that is a difference. So the cage bird's circumstance is because he's caged, and the free bird's life is also determined by his freedom. So, but for the sort of like the adjectives that they have in front of their names, caged and free, both birds are the same. And I think that Angelo has way more deeper meaning than just the idea that of African Americans and the way they're suffering. I think this poem stands for everybody that has been subjugated, for women, for their subjugation in society, and the refusal of society to be opened for them to have like their pride of place. So in whatever way or form, whichever group of society that has been sidelined, I think Angelo is using the cage bird as a metaphor for them, and the free bird as a metaphor for those who can do as they please. In terms of the structure of the poem, which is really important when you're speaking about this poem, the poem has like 38 lines in total. Stanza 1 has 7 lines, like I've already mentioned. 7 signifies perfection, which highlights the perfect life of the free bird. Stanza 2 also has 7 lines. Again, 7 signifies perfection, which highlights the hellish life of the cage bird. Stanzas 4 and 5 also have 4 lines. This reveals that both birds have an equal amount of time. I think it can be like 4 weeks, or 7 times 4 is like that could be the idea that maybe Angelo is trying to present. But the key thing that Angelo is trying to reveal to the reader is that in terms of time, both birds have equal amount of time, because time is something that is given by God. But then when it comes to experiences, society sometimes determines the experience that people have. The quality of the time available to both birds revealed that, but for their contrasting life experiences, they are the same. The poem also appears like a bird. If you look at the poem as it appears on the page, it looks like a bird, but the left wing is longer than the right one, to highlight the unequal nature of the bird's experiences. So both birds have contrasting experiences, and she uses the visual presentation of the poem on the page to reveal this. In terms of the themes, like I've already mentioned, speaks about freedom versus imprisonment. Freedom for the free bird, imprisonment for the cage bird. It also highlights the racial subjugation of African Americans in America. Also speaks about race relations in America, discrimination, racism, the haves and the have-nots, class system and classification, etc. So this bird this poem by Maya Angelou is trying to reveal to the reader that life or human experiences are tilted for those who have against those who have not. And the questions for the IGCSE usually revolve around the themes. So a question that can be put to you, for example, is that how does Maya Angelou strikingly present the contrasting experiences of both birds in cage bird? Or how does Maya Angelou strikingly convey the imprisonment and torture that she may decide the question may revolve around just one bird, and most likely maybe the cage bird. And another thing I think I failed to speak about the structure was that in terms of the structure, we see that 4 of the 6 stanzas have been, focuses on the life of the cage bird. And I think this is the case because Maya Angelou relates more with the cage bird than with the free bird. I think that's an important fact. So 4 of the 6 stanzas, almost as if 66% of the poem is on the life of the cage bird. So Maya Angelou, I think, doesn't have too much of a problem with the free bird enjoying its life, but I think she has a problem with impediment being put in the way of the cage bird experiencing the best of life. If you've enjoyed this lesson, you can purchase the course at mrquakersteaches.com. There you're going to find courses that allow you to customize how you learn, and then you'll find stanza by stanza, line by line, and word for word written analysis of all the 15 poems in the IGCSE anthology, as well as analysis of prose, drama for the IGCSE, as well as characters, the themes, conflicts, other ideas as well. You find it at mrquakersteaches.com. You can also find information on the unseen paper as well at Mr. Quakers Teaches. Additionally, you can book for private tuition in Cambridge for the Cambridge IGCSE in the IGCSE and A level in English language, English literature, geography, and history. Or you can join our tribe on Telegram, Mr. Quakers Teaches IGCSE Literature. So here you have it. Cage Bird by Maya Angelou has been demystified. Until next time, have a nice time. Bye bye.